Welcome to the Curious Case, where every tale is steeped in whispers, secrets, and a sense of cozy danger, like sharing a story beside a crackling fire on a rain-soaked evening. Today I bring you a mystery that tiptoes through the quiet corners of a quaint English village, and leads us to something far more sinister than anyone could have guessed. Grab your favorite brew and settle in, because this one will keep you leaning in closer. And hey, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from. It's always a joy knowing where our growing little detective circle is gathering from. Now let's dive in. Miss Marple and the Shadow Beneath the Lace Curtain. The summer fete at Fernley Hollow was, as always, a charming affair. Rows of smiling faces, bunting fluttering in the breeze, the clatter of teacups, and children's laughter echoing beneath the ringing church bells. But for Miss Marple, the event was more than just sponge cakes and raffle tickets. It was a theater of hidden glances and buried grudges. She moved quietly through the bustle, her gloved hands folded just so, observing the subtle dance of village life, a woman too eagerly pushing her prize-winning preserves, the sudden hush that fell when the retired colonel strolled past, and the awkward standoff between two sisters pretending not to remember a decades-old betrayal. Then, nestled between the flower stall and the duck pond game, she spotted a table nearly swallowed by shadows and silence. Its stallholder, a pinched woman with a face carved by time and bitterness, barely acknowledged passers-by. Miss Marple's attention, however, was caught not by the woman but by the strange object at the center of her table, a velvet-lined box, barely larger than a paperback, its corners frayed and its clasp delicately broken. It wasn't beautiful, not in the traditional sense, but something about it refused to be ignored. As she lifted the lid, a chill swept her skin, and a soft, lilting tune spiraled out, unsettling, like a lullaby remembered from a fever dream. Beneath the fabric, hidden under a folded lace handkerchief, lay a single photograph, a girl in white standing in front of Ashcroft House, the long-abandoned manor on the edge of the village, now overrun with ivy and stories better left untold. "Odd little thing," the stallholder said sharply, her gaze shifting ever so slightly toward the crumbling estate across the field. "Belonged to Eliza Trenwith. Poor thing vanished near 30 years ago. Some say she ran off, others, well, they say she never left." Miss Marple didn't reply. Her fingers had stilled over the photo, her mind already tugging at threads long left to tangle. The village, it seemed, had once again wrapped its darkest secrets in ribbons and lace, and the music had just begun. It was a quiet Thursday, when Eleanor Grayson arrived in Thistlebrook, a village where time itself seemed to have forgotten to move forward. She came with nothing but a single leather case, and a letter, yellowed with age, bearing the crest of a manor no longer marked on any map. The villagers watched her from behind lace curtains, their whispers barely audible over the soft rustle of autumn leaves. At the edge of the village stood Wren Hollow House, abandoned, ivy-choked, and rumored to be cursed. No one had lived there since the Hollowby tragedy, a story seldom told, and never in full. That evening, Eleanor was seen pushing open the rusted gates, her footsteps echoing through the overgrown garden. The next morning, the old clockmaker, who hadn't spoken of the past in 20 years, was found pacing outside his shop, muttering that the song had started again. By dusk, strange things began to stir. A melody played from nowhere, a child spoke of a woman crying in the mirror, and the village dogs refused to go near Wren Hollow. Over tea at the inn, Mrs. Hemsworth, whose memory missed nothing, and whose tongue missed no scandal, whispered to Eleanor about Ada Hollowburn, the last daughter of the house, who vanished one winter night without a trace, leaving behind only a locked music box and blood on the banister. They said the box held a secret tune, one that Ada had composed in fear, a message for someone who never came. That night, Eleanor lit a single lamp and wound the box, only to find the melody missing a beat, as though something had been stolen from the sound itself. A cold wind shivered through the room, though no windows were open. She pressed the box to her ear, hearing not music, but a whisper. Just 3 words. Faint and hoarse. He's still here. And in that moment, Eleanor knew she hadn't come to uncover a mystery. She had come to finish a story that someone, or something, had never wanted told. For years, the old Briarwood cottage sat untouched at the edge of Thistle Hollow, draped in ivy and whispered about only when the wind howled through the trees. But when an intricately carved compass, ancient, rusted and humming faintly with a strange pull, was unearthed by a young boy near the abandoned well, the village began to stir with unease. Eloise Finch, a retired historian with a keen eye for forgotten lore, took quiet interest. She noticed how the locals shared wary glances, how their voices dipped when she mentioned the cottage or the compass. Determined to dig deeper, she uncovered a fragment of a journal hidden beneath floorboards in the chapel, one that spoke of a vanished cartographer, Elias Gray, who'd mapped not just terrain, but secrets, and who'd disappeared one foggy night in 1891 after visiting Briarwood. Whispers hinted at forbidden knowledge, of a map that revealed places that shouldn't exist, and of a pact sealed beneath a blood moon. As Eloise pressed on, more secrets bled through the cracks. A veiled affair between Elias and the wife of a revered clergyman, a string of unspoken disappearances, and a circle of villagers who still met in the woods at dusk. The deeper she delved, the more the air thickened with tension, as though the village itself was holding its breath. A blind herbalist murmured of a compass that never points north, and Eloise began to suspect the object wasn't just a relic, but a key. That night, beneath flickering candlelight, she mapped out everything she'd gathered, realizing the truth wasn't just hidden, it was protected, and someone, perhaps still alive, would do anything to keep it buried. The morning fog clung to the village of Elmridge, like an old secret refusing to lift. Inside the ivy-clad walls of Wetherby Manor, silence reigned, until a piercing scream shattered the stillness. Minutes later, the housekeeper found Lord Edgar Wetherby slumped over his desk, eyes wide open, lips curled in what seemed more like realization than fear. What startled the town more, however, wasn't the death itself. It was what he held in his cold, stiff hands, a crimson-stained feather, and a folded piece of parchment, written in a language no one could decipher. Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time Miss Eleanor Graves, the retired headmistress turned reluctant sleuth, heard of it over her morning tea, villagers were already whispering about the Raven's curse, tied to the Wetherby estate. Eleanor, with a mind as sharp as frost and a memory that missed nothing, quietly noted that Lord Edgar had been a recluse since returning from a doomed archaeological dig in Turkey nearly 2 decades ago. A dig where one man had vanished and another had gone mad. That same madness, they now feared, had come home to roost. As Eleanor visited the manor later that afternoon, she found the study locked and the constable pacing nervously by the door. The desk inside had been ransacked, old maps burnt halfway in the fireplace, and the strange feather had already been sent for analysis. But what caught Eleanor's eye was not what was present. It was what was missing. A brass key always worn around Edgar's neck, and an obsidian figurine from his travels, now gone without a trace. His widow, Lady Clarissa, greeted Eleanor with dry eyes, and a tension in her jaw that suggested grief was not her primary emotion. When asked about the parchment, she claimed ignorance but faltered. When Eleanor mentioned the feather, "It was supposed to be buried with him," she whispered, almost to herself before quickly correcting. "I mean, I've never seen it." Outside, children sang old rhymes that suddenly sounded darker, and Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that this was no simple death, but a carefully orchestrated message. Something ancient had awakened, and it had chosen to speak through the dead. The air inside Blackthorn Manor was thick with the scent of dust and old secrets. As Inspector Alina Graves stepped over the threshold, her sharp gaze absorbing every shadow, Lady Harrow, draped in mourning black, met her with tearless eyes and hands that trembled, not from grief but from restraint, as though too much was left unsaid. Her voice, calm yet clipped, spoke of her husband's sleepless habits and unexpected visitors. but it was the flicker behind her eyes that betrayed her. A flicker not of sorrow, but of tightly coiled fear. Leaving Lady Harrow behind, Alina questioned the manor's longtime caretaker, a stoic man who confessed, after some hesitation, to seeing a cloaked figure by the west garden just before midnight. He dismissed it as a dream until he found muddy footprints outside the sealed conservatory. Yet it was the next conversation with an aging librarian from the village that shifted the investigation's pulse. She whispered of forbidden journals once stored in the estate's tower library, journals belonging to Eleanor Harrow, the previous lady of the house who vanished 50 years ago, under eerie circumstances. The librarian's voice trembled as she confessed the books were gone, stolen days before Lord Harrow's death. At the edge of the manor grounds, Alina encountered a collector of rare instruments, Mr. Thorne, whose face paled at the mention of the manor's antique harpsichord. He had appraised it once, long ago, and claimed its keys hid more than music. He'd tried to reacquire it in secret, but had been warned off by whom he refused to say. That night, in the flickering light of her lantern, Alina pressed a key on the dusty harpsichord, and heard not a note, but the faint click of a hidden latch. Something shifted deep inside its frame. Her breath caught as she realized. This was not merely an instrument, but a vault that had been opened and emptied. Whatever had once been hidden there was now loose in the world, and Lord Harrow's murder was only the beginning of a truth too dangerous to remain buried. As the last embers of twilight flickered through the stained glass window, Eleanor felt the music draw her in like a whisper from the past. An old haunting melody played from a box that hadn't sung in decades. But something was off. The tune, though familiar, carried strange dissonance, notes subtly rearranged, like a voice trying to speak through forgotten time. It struck her not as a lullaby, but as a warning wrapped in nostalgia. With each note, fragments of an old village tale resurfaced. An unsolved disappearance, a girl named Celeste who vanished one stormy night, her name barely whispered now. A rhyme, long buried in Eleanor's childhood, echoed in the cadence, about a maiden swallowed by the sea, betrayed by love, cursed by fate. The music felt like a key, unlocking what the town had tried desperately to erase. She remembered the glances, the stifled words whenever Celeste was mentioned, the way even elders changed the subject or looked away, as if the truth had fangs. Now, listening closer, Eleanor recognized something deliberate in the melody. A pattern. Could the altered notes be initials? Coordinates? A plea? She scribbled frantically, mapping the notes like a puzzle, realizing the box was more than a relic. It was a confession, left behind by someone who knew too much. The weight of the village's silence, once passive, now screamed through the air, and in that moment, Eleanor understood. The story of Celeste hadn't ended. It had been buried, and the music, the broken, aching music, was calling her to dig it up, piece by painful piece, tucked away beneath the dust of forgotten years. In a dimly lit annex of the old village hall, Eliza Hartford's trembling hands turned the pages of a brittle, leather-bound registry. Her heart beat with a strange urgency, a rhythm fueled by something deeper than curiosity. It was the echo of a truth long silenced. There, scrawled in fading ink, lay a name, unfamiliar to the world, but now pulsing with meaning. It was paired, not boldly, but almost apologetically, beside that of Cassandra Elwood, the woman whose sudden disappearance, half a century ago, had never been solved. The ink was uneven, as if the writer hesitated, aware they were inscribing something forbidden. In the margins, nearly lost beneath smudged fingerprints, a cryptic note whispered of a scandalous affection. A union opposed a bond that had once threatened to unravel the threads of an esteemed family name. As Eliza read on, a pattern emerged, not just of love, but of surveillance, suppression and fear. Cassandra's name appeared again later in a list of hospital patients, but under a false surname. A resident nurse, now elderly and hesitant, later confessed in hushed tones that Cassandra had arrived at the facility broken, not in body, but in spirit, as though she had been erased, not lost. The only possession she clung to, even in her fading mind, was a worn music box. Its melody, though weathered with time, had grown distorted, its once cheerful tune now a haunting warped lament. That melody became a ghost in Eliza's thoughts. She began to believe it was a cipher, a melodic message stitched together by a man who had loved Cassandra in defiance of society. Each altered note hinted at a time, a place, perhaps even a name, encoded to reach beyond the grave. As Eliza pursued the mystery, villagers grew silent, conversations stalled, windows closed quietly when she passed. It wasn't just history she was stirring. It was a collective wound. The town, once complicit in Cassandra's vanishing, had buried her memory under layers of polite lies and social obedience. But now, that truth, like the music box's tune, refused to stay silent. The very air seemed charged with secrets yearning to be heard. And as Eliza sat alone beneath the gaslight's flicker, melody looping endlessly, she realized with chilling clarity, this wasn't just a love lost. It was a conspiracy of silence, wrapped in sorrow, and stitched into the very fabric of the village itself. The discovery was far from simple ornamentation. This music box, with its delicate filigree and time-worn melody, was no mere keepsake. When Eleanor Vale first held it in her gloved hands beneath the dim light of her study lamp, she sensed something pulsing beneath its elegance, a secret almost audible beneath the melody's lilt. As she tilted the box to examine its base, her trained eyes caught the faintest ridge, a near-invisible seam, as if the box itself was stitched together with the intention of being silently opened only by someone who knew what to look for. Years of collecting antiquities had taught Eleanor that beauty often served as a disguise. Her breath caught as she gently pressed against the seam. The wood gave the slightest resistance, then clicked. Inside was not the letter she half expected, but the unmistakable void of something recently removed. The velvet-lined compartment, shaped precisely to cradle folded paper, now lay empty, except for a single nearly imperceptible crease pressed into the fabric. A message had once rested here. Eleanor's mind raced. Who had retrieved it? And more importantly, why now? The timing gnawed at her. The box had only resurfaced weeks ago, anonymously donated to the museum's annual silent auction, as if someone had finally deemed it safe to release it into the world, scrubbed of its secrets. But something had gone wrong. Perhaps the letter had been forgotten inside. Perhaps its contents had frightened the donor. Either way, someone had intervened, someone who still had something to lose. The absence of the letter shouted louder than any confession. It was a theft not of mere paper, but of truth, torn away to protect a name or silence a memory. Eleanor's gaze hardened as she set the box down. This was no longer a question of lost love. It was a veiled crime wrapped in satin and song. And somewhere, someone was watching, hoping the trail had gone cold. But Eleanor knew better. Secrets never stay buried. Not when the past starts whispering again. As the pieces of the puzzle began to align, Eleanor realized the significance of the missing letter went far beyond simple neglect. The deliberate removal of the message, hidden in the delicate compartment of the music box, struck a deep chord. This was no accident. It was a calculated act, performed just before the box's reappearance at the village fete. Eleanor's experienced eyes traced the fine details, the subtle shift in the box's mechanism, the way the compartment no longer closed quite the same way. It wasn't just the absence of a letter that unsettled her. It was the quiet intention behind it. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase a part of history, to shield a family from a scandal that had been long buried, but was now poised to resurface. "There's always a price for secrets," she muttered, her voice thick with the weight of the realization. The erasure was not just about protecting a lover's words. It was part of a larger scheme, a quiet yet forceful attempt to rewrite the past. The more she uncovered, the more she felt the suffocating grip of the conspiracy. This was no ordinary cover-up. It was a meticulous and deliberate manipulation to alter the very fabric of the village's history. The murder, the mysterious disappearance, and now the music box's cryptic reappearance were all connected. like threads pulled by an unseen hand, each pulling tighter and tighter. Eleanor's suspicions turned to certainty as she pieced together the fragmented whispers of villagers, ancient records, and the lingering presence of the music box. She could almost feel the ghosts of the past pushing their way back into the present, intent on being heard once more. This wasn't just about protecting a family's name. It was about preserving a carefully constructed narrative, one that was teetering on the edge of collapse. The implications were far-reaching. An entire community had conspired to bury a truth that could destroy everything they had worked to preserve. Eleanor's mind raced as she traced the threads, each one unraveling the grand illusion. Someone had gone to great lengths to erase Lillian's voice, and now someone would stop at nothing to keep the full truth of the past buried. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, and as she considered her next move, she realized that uncovering the identity of those who orchestrated this cover-up was only the beginning. There was a deeper question. Why had they done it? What drove them to such lengths to keep a tragic love affair hidden? The answers, Eleanor knew, were more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. As she prepared to confront the shadows of the past, Eleanor steeled herself for the unraveling of a truth too devastating to ignore. The music box was no longer just an object. It had become the key to a dark and tangled legacy, and its final note would reveal a cost that would haunt them all forever. Miss Marple's careful orchestration of the upcoming gathering was not a mere social event. It was a masterstroke in drawing the key players into the same room, where their carefully guarded secrets would begin to unravel, like thread pulled from a fraying tapestry. With a calm yet purposeful hand, she penned invitations to the individuals who had long danced around the truth. Mrs. Tinsley, with her cold reserve and unsettling calm, the housekeeper whose unwavering loyalty masked a deeper knowledge of the house's hidden life, the local historian whose obsession with the past bordered on unhealthy, and the antique dealer whose furtive glances betrayed a nervousness that spoke volumes. Each invitation was crafted with a subtle pressure, a quiet but insistent call to attend, couched in the language of politeness and discretion, ensuring none would suspect the true purpose behind the gathering. As Miss Marple sealed the final envelope, her thoughts wandered, calculating the impact this meeting would have. She knew that within the walls of Ashcombe House, the truth could no longer stay buried. The invitation was not merely a formality. It was the first step in bringing the hidden past into the light. She trusted that once these individuals were together, each would feel the weight of their own silence, each guest would feel the pull of their own culpability. Her voice, when she quietly spoke to herself, carried the sharp edge of resolve. In the gathering of those who hide, even the smallest misstep will be exposed. The stage was set, the calm before the storm hung in the air, a delicate balance between civility and simmering tension. As each invitation was dispatched, Miss Marple could almost hear the quiet whispers of their consciences stirring in the silence. The gathering was more than just tea. It was a crucible, where every polite smile would conceal a crack, every sip of tea could betray a guilty thought, and the air would pulse with unspoken truths, waiting to be revealed. The day of the gathering arrived, and Miss Marple presided over it with an air of serene precision. The house itself, a reflection of another era, was carefully arranged to evoke the past. The soft clink of fine porcelain, the delicate rustle of lace tablecloths, and the comforting aroma of steeped tea all worked together to transport the guests back in time, to an age where the past was fresh in their minds, and whispered secrets were exchanged over cups of tea and slices of carefully prepared cake. But beneath this facade of nostalgia, the tension was palpable, a current of unease that neither the tea nor the cake could entirely mask. As the guests arrived, Miss Marple guided the conversation with gentle expertise, nudging each person into reminiscing about old friends, faded scandals, and long-forgotten stories. Her questions floated through the air with the lightness of a feather, but each one was carefully calculated, drawing each guest further into a web of implication. The atmosphere was thick with the unspoken, as Miss Marple's seemingly innocuous remarks began to press down on the hearts of those gathered, pushing them to confront what they had long tried to ignore. The words she chose, both soothing and incisive, acted like a mirror, reflecting their deepest fears and regrets back at them, causing their carefully controlled facades to begin to crack. For the first time, The secrets they had kept buried for so long seemed to rise to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. In that room, surrounded by the echoes of the past, each guest was forced to face the weight of their own silence. Miss Marple watched them closely, her eyes twinkling with quiet satisfaction as she nudged them closer to the truth. The game had begun, and every word, every gesture, would lead them one step closer to the revelation they could no longer avoid. Miss Marple's words floated through the room, their weight becoming palpable. "It is remarkable," she mused quietly, her tone laced with a quiet wisdom, "how the smallest details of yesterday can still resonate today." Her eyes were sharp, studying her guests intently as she continued, her voice almost a whisper that seemed to echo in the silence that followed. "Even when the past has been buried, its fingerprints remain, often in the places we least expect." The room, bathed in soft candlelight, seemed to respond to her words. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner was suddenly louder, as if time itself were acknowledging the weight of her statement. Every piece of furniture, every arrangement, every carefully selected decoration, seemed to be part of an invisible web, connecting the present to the past. The guests, each one seated with a calm exterior, were unknowingly drawn into this delicate tapestry. They were like pawns on a chessboard, but Miss Marple was the one pulling the strings, guiding the game toward its inevitable conclusion. Her gaze swept across the room as she spoke, each guest a figure in the grand puzzle she had carefully assembled. The house itself felt like a silent observer, its walls heavy with secrets, and its floors worn by the weight of countless footsteps. The gentle clink of porcelain against delicate china, and the soft murmur of voices created an almost surreal atmosphere. And yet, beneath this veneer of civility, there was something far more dangerous lurking in the shadows. And then, with a subtle motion, Miss Marple's eyes fell upon the music box, a seemingly innocuous object, sitting quietly on the side table, waiting for its moment. Her fingers, as steady as ever, reached toward it. It seemed to tremble under her touch, as though it too recognized that something monumental was about to unfold. The faintest of smiles played across her lips as she set the music box in motion with a deliberate twist of the key. The familiar melody began to hum, its notes as soft and comforting as a lullaby. But this time, something was different. The notes warped, stretched, and twisted into something unfamiliar. The once serene melody now felt eerie and unsettling, like a fractured memory trying to emerge from the fog. As the music continued, Miss Marple's gaze never wavered from her guests. Her sharp eyes observed every movement, every shift in posture, every twitch of a hand. She could feel the tension thickening in the air, even as the conversation around her remained light and seemingly innocent. Her guests, unaware of the subtle cue, continued to sip their tea and engage in polite exchanges. But Miss Marple knew the music had stirred something within them. It was a trigger, a signal for their minds to return to a time they'd tried desperately to forget. "I find," Miss Marple continued, her voice still calm but now laden with a hint of something more, something darker, "that music, when altered just so, has the power to speak louder than words." Her eyes flicked to each guest in turn, the question unspoken but clear. Does it not have the ability to reveal what has long been hidden? Her words were not just casual observation, they were a challenge, an invitation to uncover the truth. Miss Marple knew well that some of her guests had once known the original tune intimately. To those who had heard it before, it was more than just a melody. It was a piece of their past, a key to long-forgotten memories. And now, with this subtle change, she had set the stage for them to either confront those memories or bury them once more. The altered tune echoed in the room, and for a brief fleeting moment, the illusion of normalcy was shattered. The gentle murmur of conversation began to wane, replaced by an undercurrent of unease that spread like wildfire among the guests. Their faces, once composed, now showed signs of subtle discomfort. Eyes darted quickly, fingers tapped nervously against teacups, and the quiet rustle of fabric shifting was the only other sound that broke the silence. And then, at the exact moment the music reached the haunting refrain, a single response sliced through the tension like a knife. One of the guests, A man who had until then remained composed and seemingly unaffected, suddenly faltered. His hand trembled ever so slightly as it gripped his teacup, the porcelain now seeming to weigh much heavier than before. A faint shadow passed over his face, his eyes darting to the music box before quickly averting. It was a small thing, a momentary hesitation, but to Miss Marple, it was everything. The shift in his voice, the brief tremor in his hand, the almost imperceptible change in his expression. It all pointed to one thing. He knew something. The truth, buried so deep within him, had been stirred by the altered melody. And yet, like a seasoned actor caught off guard, he quickly masked his reaction, flashing a tight smile, and attempting to regain his composure. But Miss Marple was not fooled. She had seen it all before. She had known that a single note, a single word, could break even the most carefully constructed facade. And in that moment, as she looked into his eyes, she saw the weight of a secret pressing down on him, something far darker than the surface allowed. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, suspended between civility and the threat of a revelation. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened, and she knew this was the moment when the truth, no matter how hard fought, would rise to the surface, and she was ready to drag it into the light. The fragile veneer of normality that had hung over the gathering cracked subtly, but unmistakably, as though an invisible thread had snapped under the pressure of an unspoken truth. A small tremor passed through the room, as the altered melody reached a point that only a select few would recognize. For a moment, it seemed as if time itself paused, holding its breath, as a glance was exchanged, quick, sharp, and full of hidden weight. The tremor in the guest's hand was brief, yet it was enough, just enough to reveal the faintest trace of knowledge, something too intimate, too personal, to be ignored. It was a knowledge only someone deeply entangled with the original tune could possess. Miss Marple's sharp eyes observed it all. "Interesting, isn't it?" she murmured, her voice almost drowned by the weight of the silence that followed. Her words were casual, but the question was loaded with more meaning than any of her guests could possibly fathom. "How the past has a way of asserting itself when least expected," she added, as if contemplating the mystery of time itself. Her words were a mere whisper in the midst of a room filled with hushed voices, but the undercurrent of revelation that accompanied them was unmistakable. The fleeting panic that flashed across the suspect's face confirmed what Miss Marple had already suspected. The music had done more than just create an unsettling atmosphere. It had exposed a silent truth, one that was far too significant to remain buried. The strain, the hesitation in his voice, the tightening of his grip, each was a silent confession, a testament to a secret that had been too carefully guarded for far too long. Miss Marple's mind raced as she pieced together the puzzle, the altered melody being the final key to unlocking the hidden past. It wasn't just a melody anymore. It was a message, one that was encoded in every note, every shift of the tune, a message that could only be understood by one who knew the truth. As the tea conversation resumed, Miss Marple's mind lingered on the implications of the melody. It had never been just a harmless keepsake, and the missing letter that had initially seemed so crucial was nothing more than a distraction. The real clue, the true message, had always been within the music. The very notes, altered so subtly, had served as a private signal, a signal meant only for the person who knew exactly what it meant. It was a message that no one else could hear, but the guilty party. They heard it loud and clear. "There is something most deliberate about these notes," Miss Marple whispered to herself, her voice low but certain, as if speaking to an invisible audience. Her words were both a revelation and a lament. She could now see the entire puzzle, laid out in front of her in its stark simplicity. The music had betrayed the guilty party. It had revealed the truth in a way that no words ever could. In each subtle alteration of the tune, there was an undeniable truth, a secret that had been encoded just for the one who needed to hear it. The more she thought about it, the clearer the mystery became. The letter that had been so carefully planted, the false leads, the carefully constructed facade, they were all distractions. The real message had been there all along, hidden in plain sight within the music, a testament to the murderer's guilt. Only the one who had committed the unspeakable act could fully comprehend the meaning of those altered notes. And in that moment, Miss Marple understood with absolute certainty. The music itself would be the final arbiter of truth. With a calm determination, Miss Marple arranged a private meeting with the suspect, far from the prying eyes of the others. The setting was quiet, the air thick with tension, as the village parlor became the stage for the confrontation that had been inevitable from the very start. The past, with all its unresolved shadows, was about to collide head-on with the present. In the stillness, Miss Marple invited the suspect to speak. "I believe it's time we discussed matters that have long been hidden," she said, her voice measured but filled with an undeniable firmness. The suspect, now trapped in the web of his own lies, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted nervously as if searching for an escape, but there was none. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in as Miss Marple's words settled like heavy stones upon his conscience. He was caught between the weight of defensiveness and the undeniable knowledge that his time had come. There would be no more hiding behind polite conversation or carefully constructed facades. The truth had already begun its ascent, and there was no stopping it now. The air in the parlor grew thick with tension as the suspect hesitated, his words faltering in the silence that had settled around them. "I have nothing to hide, Miss Marple," he said, but the faint tremor in his voice betrayed the uncertainty that clung to every syllable. Miss Marple's eyes, ever sharp and observant, missed nothing. She noted the slight twitch of his fingers, the way his eyes darted briefly to the door, as though contemplating escape. Every second was a clue in itself. She had seen this before, the subtle dance of deception that could only be unraveled by a careful, deliberate mind. Her voice, calm and unwavering, cut through the pretense like a blade. "Then let us speak plainly," she insisted, the words carrying an undeniable weight. The cadence of her speech was measured, almost rhythmic, but her resolve was as clear as daylight. "The facts are laid before us, secrets buried under years of silence and denial. We stand at the edge of truth, and I must know," she continued, her gaze never leaving his face. "What did you do to ensure that the past remained undisturbed?" The suspect stiffened, a subtle shift in his posture that spoke volumes. His reply came slowly, as though each word was being drawn from him against his will, burdened with the weight of a lifetime's worth of regret and guilt. In that moment, the quiet parlor became a courtroom of sorts, a place where the past and present collided with an inevitability that neither party could escape. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth. Miss Marple's calm insistence pressed against the suspect's defenses, and he faltered, caught in the web of his own deception. As he hesitated, Miss Marple's gaze never wavered. Her words, gentle yet firm, seemed to hang in the air like a quiet storm. "The truth," she murmured softly, "has been gathering for far too long." Each phrase was a step closer to the final revelation, each silence more deafening than the last. The storm of truth was upon them, and nothing could hold it back any longer. "I have uncovered records," Miss Marple continued, "that speak of a hidden engagement." She allowed the words to settle, letting the weight of them sink into the suspect's consciousness. Her tone was quiet, but insistent, each syllable laced with quiet authority. "Lillian was betrothed, but in secret, to a man whose name is only spoken in hushed whispers." She paused, allowing the tension in the room to rise before she continued. "But there is another, a rival whose presence was as persistent as it was unacknowledged." The suspect's discomfort deepened, his fingers twitching at his side, his jaw tightening as the truth began to unravel around him. Miss Marple's next words were delivered with quiet precision, but their impact was anything but gentle. "The letter," she said. "The one you thought lost, the one you assumed had no significance. It was never meant for anyone but Lillian's true suitor, a final token of affection, a last gesture before fate intervened." Her gaze hardened, locking onto him with the weight of undeniable evidence. But it was more than that. It was a final declaration, an act of love, yes, but also the beginning of a rivalry that would tear lives apart. The suspect shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale. He was aware that each word Miss Marple spoke cut deeper, touching upon matters he had long hoped to bury forever. The very object they had been discussing, the music box, that innocent relic of the past, was in fact the linchpin of it all. The music, Miss Marple continued, her voice soft but unwavering, was never just a keepsake. It was a message, a reminder of a love lost, and a rivalry that could never be erased. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied the man before her. And you, my dear friend, are at the heart of it all. In that moment, the mystery was no longer a question of who had committed the crime. It was a question of why, and what lengths the guilty would go to in order to protect their secrets. Miss Marple's calm, measured approach had peeled away the layers of deception, and now, with the weight of the past pressing down on them both, the truth could no longer be ignored. The quiet parlor, once a place of polite conversation, had transformed into the stage for an inevitable reckoning, one that neither the suspect nor the mystery could escape. The music box, a seemingly innocent relic of a bygone era, stood as the silent witness to a forbidden love, its delicate notes telling a story of passion, betrayal, and secrecy. Its very existence, once a symbol of pure affection, now carried the weight of years of buried lies. Each note that played from its intricate mechanisms was no longer a melody but a haunting reminder of the past, a message that had been carefully concealed for far too long. As Miss Marple's voice, calm and steady, broke the silence, it became clear that the time for evasion had passed. Her words were like a quiet storm, unraveling the fabric of a tangled web that had remained hidden in plain sight. With the precision of a seasoned investigator, Miss Marple laid bare the tragic narrative of Lillian's lost love, a tale intertwined with the lives of two men whose rivalry had spawned a bitter affair. This clandestine relationship had not only disrupted the peace of the village, but had also sown seeds of jealousy, resentment, and ultimately, tragic consequences. Under Miss Marple's unwavering gaze, the suspect could no longer hold his ground. His defenses, once firm, began to crack like brittle walls. The truth he had desperately kept hidden was now slipping into the open. With a long, reluctant sigh, the suspect finally gave in. "I altered the tune, Miss Marple," he confessed, his voice trembling as though each word was an admission of a crime that had haunted him for years. "Many years ago I took it upon myself to change the melody. I knew it held a message meant only for Lillian's true love." His voice faltered, and he paused to gather himself before continuing. "I believed that by tampering with it, I could silence the truth that might have undone everything we had fought to protect." The weight of his confession hung in the air like an unbearable burden. The message hidden in its original composition was more than just a song. It was a declaration of a forbidden love, one that, if revealed, could shatter everything. Miss Marple's voice, ever steady, cut through his admission. "And so you ensured that the delicate balance of the past was forever disturbed?" she inquired, her words not accusing, but gently pressing him further. The suspect's response came after a long, sorrowful pause. "Yes," he whispered, his shoulders slumping as if the very admission had drained the life from him. "I feared that once the truth was exposed, it would destroy not just my reputation, but the fragile peace of our community. We had all lived with the silence for so long, and I thought that by keeping it hidden we could preserve the life we had built." His confession, spoken with such quiet regret, resonated with an eerie finality. The music box, once a cherished symbol of love, had now become the very instrument of betrayal. Miss Marple's sharp mind took in every detail, recognizing the deep cost of vanity and pride. His alteration of the tune had not been driven by malice, but by a desperate desire to protect a tarnished honor, to shield a love that had never been allowed to flourish. Yet in his attempt to shield the truth, he had unwittingly set in motion a series of events that could never be undone. The music box resurfacing had stirred more than mere curiosity. It had reopened a door that had been closed for far too long. As it reappeared at the Fed, it carried with it the weight of old secrets, long buried beneath layers of time and lies. What had once been a piece of nostalgia now stood as a symbol of broken promises, and the inevitable reckoning that had finally come. Miss Marple's eyes, still as keen as ever, saw the full scope of the tragedy. How a single moment of pride, a single decision to alter the past, had led to the unraveling of everything. The truth once hidden so carefully, was now slipping into the light, and nothing could stop it from taking its course. The music box, once a cherished memento of love and devotion, now stood as a silent witness to a far darker tale. Its melody, once tender and sweet, had been altered years ago in an act of desperation, and the haunting tune it played now served as a reminder of a past filled with betrayal and hidden truths. Its very existence had become a catalyst for a series of events, a tangled web of fear, guilt and murder. Fear, Miss Marple mused, her voice tinged with the wisdom of years, is a powerful force. It can drive even the most composed of us to acts we would otherwise never consider. The moment the music box reappeared, panic swept through the room like wildfire, igniting a storm of emotions that no one could contain. The tension in the air was palpable. Miss Marple recalled with chilling clarity the first reaction to its presence. A gentleman standing near the box had stiffened, his throat tightening as the altered melody filled the room. His hands trembled ever so slightly, an involuntary gesture that betrayed the fear he had tried so desperately to hide. The way his breath caught, the nervous twitch of his eye, told Miss Marple everything she needed to know. In that instant, it became clear, the past had not been buried after all. It was still alive, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be exposed. The suspect's confession had been a reluctant admission, but it had been enough. He had altered the music box tune years ago, believing that by doing so, he could silence a painful truth, a truth that if revealed would destroy everything he had worked to protect. The melody had once carried a secret message meant only for Lillian's true love. The confession was simple, yet devastating. I feared that if the truth came out, it would ruin not just my life, but the fragile peace that the community had fought so hard to maintain. The suspect had admitted, his voice cracking under the weight of his own guilt. In that moment, Miss Marple understood. His motives were not driven by malice, but by the desperate desire to protect a reputation built on lies and fear. As the town absorbed the news of Miss Tinsley's death, it became clear that the music box was more than just an object. It was a key to a mystery that had been buried for far too long. The confession revealed that this was not just a tale of jealousy or romance gone wrong, but of fear so great that it had driven someone to murder. Someone had killed to ensure that the past stayed buried, believing that their actions would protect them from exposure. The music box, once an innocent object of affection, had become an instrument of death, carrying with it the echoes of betrayal and broken hearts. The town, a place built on the careful preservation of appearances, had long been a breeding ground for secrets. The desire to protect reputations, to preserve the illusion of a perfect life, had led to a cascade of events that no one could have anticipated. The confession, the resurfacing of the music box, and ultimately the murder, had torn the veil of secrecy wide open, exposing the fragile foundations upon which everything had been built. Miss Marple, with her usual calm precision, dissected the events with quiet authority, revealing the extent to which fear and guilt had shaped the actions of those involved. The music box, she said softly, was never just a symbol of love. It became a reminder of something far darker, a symbol of the lengths people will go to when they fear the truth will destroy them. Her words resonated in the room, heavy with the weight of the years of silence that had surrounded this hidden affair. The love that had once bloomed between Lillian and her suitor had been tainted by the rivalry that had emerged between the two men who had both vied for her heart. The secrecy that surrounded their relationship had festered in the shadows, and now, decades later, the music box was pulling that darkness into the light. As Miss Marple continued, she spoke of the deep scars left by these long-held secrets. Fear, she said, is not just an emotion. It is a powerful force that can shape lives, destroy friendships, and even lead to murder. She paused, her gaze fixed on the suspect who had confessed, his face now a mask of regret. Your actions, your alteration of the music, were not just a simple lie. They were a deliberate attempt to rewrite history, to change the past to suit your own desires. But in doing so, you set in motion a chain of events that could never be undone. The community, gripped by the collective fear of exposure, had acted out of a misguided sense of self-preservation. They had chosen to protect their own reputations at the cost of truth and justice. Miss Marple's calm voice cut through the tension. The music box, once a token of love, became a harbinger of death. It was a reminder that the past, no matter how deeply buried, can never be fully erased. With the truth now exposed, Miss Marple turned her attention to the final piece of the puzzle, restoring what little honor remained to Lillian's tarnished name. Lillian's reputation was ruined, Miss Marple declared, her voice steady and resolute. But it was not she who caused this destruction. It was the actions of those who feared the truth would destroy them. Her eyes never left the suspect, as if to emphasize the weight of her words. The truth must be acknowledged, she continued, if we are ever to heal the wounds of the past. In that moment, Miss Marple took it upon herself to ensure that the truth would not be lost to the sands of time. I have recorded every detail, she said, her voice carrying the authority of one who had seen much in her years. The evidence is irrefutable. Lillian's memory must be cleared. The lies that have surrounded her must be exposed. The music box, once an innocent object of affection, had become the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The alteration of its tune meant to protect one man's honor, had instead set off a tragic series of events, leading to murder, betrayal, and the unmasking of long-buried secrets. The night had descended quietly, its stillness almost unnerving, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Miss Marple sat in her cottage, the only sound the occasional crackle of the fire, as it burned low in the hearth. The weight of the day's discoveries hung heavily on her shoulders. The mystery she had unraveled was more intricate and far-reaching than she had anticipated, and as she reflected on the events, she couldn't help but feel a deep sense of sorrow for what had transpired in the village. What began as a simple investigation into a forgotten tragedy had spiraled into a series of revelations, each more devastating than the last. Her thoughts returned to Lillian Marchmont, the woman who had for so long been nothing more than a name wrapped in scandal, had now been restored, if only partially, to the dignity that had been cruelly taken from her. The truth, Miss Marple knew, had a way of burrowing deep into the cracks of history, waiting for the right moment to emerge. But it was never without a price. The silence of the community, the collective shame that had allowed a lie to fester for decades, had come at a high cost. Lillian's reputation, once marred by whispers and innuendo, was now being slowly pieced back together, but it was not without resistance. There were those who would rather let the past remain buried than face the consequences of their actions. It was not just the actions of one or two people that had perpetuated this lie, but the actions of an entire village, all too willing to sweep the truth under the rug for the sake of their own comfort. Miss Marple had seen this before, the quiet complicity of people who, when faced with the choice between truth and self-preservation, chose the latter. She had watched as the villagers clung to their false sense of innocence, their reputation more important to them than the life of one woman whose love had been twisted by lies. The fear of exposure had gripped them all, a fear so powerful that it had led to murder. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she recalled the delicate web of secrets that she had untangled with such care. It was as if each revelation, each hidden betrayal, had been a thread in an intricate tapestry of deceit, with the figure of Lillian Marchmont at its center. Every secret she uncovered revealed more of the complex, interconnected lives of the villagers. The rivalries, the jealousies, the desires that had festered beneath the surface, each contributing to the tragedy that had unfolded over the years. At the heart of it all had been that one crucial lie, that single betrayal that had led to the demise of an innocent woman's reputation. And it was this lie that had taken root so deeply, that even now, in the face of overwhelming evidence, many would rather not confront it. As she sat in the quiet of her cottage, Miss Marple allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had seen countless cases, each one unique in its own way, yet the common thread between them all was human nature, the way fear and pride could drive people to do unspeakable things. Her mind wandered back to the music box, the object that had started it all. That innocuous little trinket, with its haunting melody, had become a symbol of the deep unspoken fears of the villagers. When the music had played, it had ignited something within them, a spark of panic that had spread like wildfire. Fear, Miss Marple thought, is a powerful thing. It can unravel even the most composed soul, driving them to desperate acts in order to preserve their carefully crafted facades. In this case it had led to murder. The altered tune, the one that had been so carefully crafted to trigger a response, had been the final push for a desperate man, the one who thought he could silence the truth once and for all. But in doing so, he had only ensured that the truth would surface, unstoppable and unyielding. Miss Marple's voice echoed in the stillness of the room, as if recounting the sequence of events to herself. The truth, she had said earlier in the day, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the surface. And so it had. With the confession of the suspect, the pieces of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. It was clear now that the fear of exposure had been so overwhelming, that it had driven the murderer to act in the most final of ways. The murder, Miss Marple understood, was not just the result of a single moment of rage, but of a long simmering tension, a fear that had been nurtured by the weight of secrets, each one adding to the burden, until it became too much to bear. It was this collective fear, Miss Marple realized, that had allowed the village to perpetuate a lie for so long. No one had been willing to confront the truth because it would mean dismantling the carefully constructed narratives they had built about themselves. Instead, they had allowed the secrets to fester, to grow like a cancer, until it had consumed everything in its path. And now the truth had emerged, exposing the ugly underbelly of a community that prided itself on its civility. There was no escaping it. The lies had been laid bare, and with them the fragile veneer of respectability that had cloaked the villagers' lives for so long. As she pondered the events, Miss Marple could not help but feel a deep sense of sadness. The actions of one individual had set off a chain of events that had ruined many lives, and it was only now, at the very end, that the truth was finally being acknowledged. It was a sobering reminder, Miss Marple thought, of the power that secrets held over people. The decisions made in the dark corners of history were not easily erased, and the wounds they left behind often took a lifetime to heal. But Miss Marple knew that healing could only begin when the truth was fully revealed. Her thoughts turned to Lillian Marchmont, the woman whose love had been corrupted by the lies of others. What had she endured? Miss Marple wondered, knowing that her name had been tarnished by forces she could not control. She had been a victim of a cruel and unjust system. But now at least, her reputation was being cleared. It was a small comfort, but it was something. The truth, Miss Marple had said in the village square earlier, must be acknowledged if we are ever to heal the wounds of our past. As the fire in the hearth flickered and died, Miss Marple felt a quiet sense of resolution. The case was over, and justice in its own way had been served. But she also knew that the impact of this case would linger long after the final word was spoken. The villagers would never be the same, not after having their complicity exposed, not after having seen just how far they were willing to go to protect themselves. And Miss Marple, sitting alone in the stillness of her cottage, understood that the truth would continue to resurface, time and time again, until it could no longer be ignored. It is only through acknowledging these ghosts that we may find solace, Miss Marple mused softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had uncovered the truth, and in doing so she had brought a measure of peace to the troubled souls of the village. But the ghosts of the past, she knew, would continue to haunt them. And perhaps, just perhaps, the lessons learned from this case would serve to prevent others from making the same mistakes. The night deepened, and Miss Marple closed her eyes, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. The truth had come to light, and in the end it had been the truth that had set them all free. Miss Marple sat in her dimly lit cottage, the warmth from the crackling fire barely touching the coolness of the night. The faint scent of old books and tea lingered in the air as her thoughts drifted back to the case that had consumed her for weeks. The final melody of justice reverberated softly in her heart, an almost musical reminder that every secret, no matter how deep or carefully concealed, would inevitably demand its reckoning. She reflected on the intricate path she had traveled to uncover the truth, the quiet, unspoken clues that had led her to this moment. It was a journey fraught with human failings, mistakes and misjudgments that at times seemed as though they were simply part of the human condition itself. The quiet community she had known for so long had been a perfect example of this delicate balance between civility and chaos, where a carefully maintained veneer of politeness masked the chaos beneath. But the case had peeled away that mask, exposing the raw emotions at the core of every decision: love, jealousy, and fear. Each of these powerful forces had driven the characters she encountered, sometimes in subtle ways, other times in more explosive outbursts. The overwhelming passion of unrequited love had pushed one person to manipulate and deceive, while jealousy had fueled another to destroy the very thing they coveted most. And fear, the most insidious of them all, had prompted actions far more sinister, making individuals so desperate to protect their reputation and keep their secrets hidden that they were willing to kill to ensure they remained buried forever. Miss Marple paused for a moment, her sharp mind racing over the events, replaying every conversation, every moment of tension, every glance that had lingered just a fraction too long. She could see it all clearly now, the threads of deceit that wove through the very fabric of the community, connecting each person to the next in an invisible web of secrets. It had all started with the music box, that innocuous heirloom that had over time become a symbol of a long-forgotten scandal. But in the end, it wasn't just the music box that had caused the unraveling of a quiet town's carefully constructed facade. It was the refusal to confront the past, to acknowledge the buried truths that lingered just beneath the surface. Miss Marple's voice was barely above a whisper, as she spoke aloud to herself, her reflection both resigned and resolute. "This case, as complex as it is but a mirror," she said, the words rolling off her tongue with the weight of years of experience. "It reflects the heart of this very community, and the way it holds secrets to protect its fragile sense of order. No one is immune to the lure of scandal, to the overwhelming pressure of fear and pride that keeps the truth locked away." The more she thought about it, the more she realized how the entire community had been complicit in the murder of truth, each individual in their own way. Some had protected the truth by burying it, some by pretending it had never existed, and some by becoming the very executioners of the past's inconvenient revelations. And the consequences of those actions, Miss Marple now understood, were far more devastating than they could have ever anticipated. As her thoughts circled around the case, her mind lingered on the human emotions that had driven every part of it. She recalled the furtive glances exchanged in the midst of the investigation, the nervous shifting of weight, the small sighs of regret that punctuated each conversation. There was a subtle tension in the air, an unspoken understanding that everyone had something to hide, and that no one would willingly allow the truth to come to light. Miss Marple, in her quiet wisdom, understood the nature of these human frailties all too well. She had seen them play out in countless investigations, and had witnessed firsthand how jealousy, love, and fear could twist even the noblest intentions into something unrecognizable. It was the constant battle between self-preservation and the desire to do what was right, and it was a battle that often ended in tragedy. "I've seen it before," she murmured softly to herself, her voice barely audible. "The same sins committed time and time again. It's always love, jealousy, and fear that bring people to the brink. And when fear is in control, it makes even the most rational person believe that silence is the only option." But as the night deepened, Miss Marple felt a stirring within her, a quiet but resolute belief that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, would always find its way to the surface. It was a force of nature, like water eroding stone, inevitable and unstoppable, and it was that truth that she would fight to uncover, no matter how long it took or how many secrets it unearthed. Her musings were interrupted as her eyes fell on the music box, now resting silently on the table before her. She had examined it countless times before, but something in the box's design had escaped her earlier inspection. She turned it over in her hands, her sharp gaze catching a small anomaly, a slight imperfection along the edge, almost unnoticeable to the casual observer, but glaringly obvious to someone like Miss Marple, who had spent a lifetime deciphering the hidden meanings in the most innocuous objects. "Curious," she said, her voice calm but filled with intent, as her fingers gently probed the edge. "This imperfection, it was deliberate. It was made to conceal something. The box isn't just an heirloom. It's a clue, a key to a story long buried." She studied the box more carefully now, not with the detached curiosity of a detective, but with the intense focus of someone who knew that this moment, this discovery, could change everything. She could feel the history in the object, the layers of secrets it had carried through the years, the lives it had touched and the crimes it had concealed. This small overlooked detail was more than a mere flaw. It was a deliberate misdirection, hiding the very truth she sought. Miss Marple could almost feel the weight of the mystery pressing in on her, and she knew that once she opened this box, everything would be different. As her fingers worked to pry open the panel, she felt the faintest tremor of excitement. The music box had kept its secrets for long enough. Now she was ready to uncover them. Miss Marple sat in the dim light of her study, the room heavy with the weight of her thoughts. The air was thick with a sense of discovery, one that seemed to stretch beyond the confines of the present case. As her fingers traced the edges of the music box, the faint irregularity in the panel caught her attention once again. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable to her trained eye. A flaw perhaps, but upon closer inspection, it felt more like a deliberate design, a hidden feature intended to conceal something more than mere dust or age. "Every object carries with it a secret," she murmured to herself, "and sometimes those secrets are carefully guarded within the smallest details." It was in that fleeting moment, a moment suspended in time, that the music box transformed before her eyes. No longer just a relic of the past, it became a keeper of untold truths, a silent witness to a story that had remained locked away for far too long. She reflected on the nature of secrets, how they fester in the silence between words, in the gaps between actions. "There is always something left unsaid," she whispered softly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. The small, almost unnoticeable flaw in the music box was no accident. It was a deliberate safeguard, a hidden message waiting to be unearthed. With a quiet resolve, Miss Marple carefully pried open the concealed panel, her heart quickening with the anticipation of what might be revealed. The small velvet pouch nestled within the box was an unexpected find. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted it, as if the very act of touching it could unlock a long-buried truth. Inside the pouch, nestled against the soft fabric, was a delicate gold wedding ring, its surface worn but still gleaming with a muted luster. At first glance, it seemed like an ordinary piece of jewelry, but as Miss Marple turned it in her hand, the faint inscription caught her attention. The initials were barely legible, but she could make out enough to understand. "LS and RP," she murmured, the names of two souls whose love had never had a chance to flourish. The date, etched in the tiniest of letters, told the story of a union that had been denied, a promise never fulfilled. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. "The ring," she said softly, as if to no one in particular, "is the symbol of a love lost, a hope never realized." It was more than just a token of affection. It was a silent testament to a love that had been thwarted by the very forces that shaped their lives. The marriage that had never occurred was not just the loss of a dream, but a life altered irrevocably by the weight of societal expectations, of duty, of fear. Miss Marple felt the sorrow of the ring's story deep within her, How love, once pure and vibrant, had been stifled, buried beneath the weight of what should have been but never was. The ring was not simply a forgotten trinket. It was a reminder of a tragic, unfulfilled promise, an echo of a time when life might have taken a different course had fear not intervened. She gazed at the ring for a long moment, her heart heavy with empathy for the souls it represented. It was clear to her now that the music box was not just a receptacle for memories, but a safeguard for secrets far too painful to confront. It had been the keeper of a truth that could not be spoken, a truth so delicate, so fraught with pain, that it had been hidden away, kept safe in the most unlikely of places. This ring, Miss Marple whispered, is a testament to a life that never had the chance to be lived, a promise broken by the cruel hand of fate. As she carefully placed the ring back into the pouch, a sense of quiet determination filled her. The mystery had unfolded before her like a delicate flower, each petal revealing a new layer of sorrow, of love, of loss. It was clear that the cost of keeping secrets was far greater than anyone could have imagined. Lives had been altered, irrevocably changed, and the shadows of those choices would linger long after the truth had been uncovered. And though the music box had once been a symbol of innocence, it had now become a repository of broken dreams, of love denied, of promises betrayed. The discovery of the ring left Miss Marple with an unshakable sense of the depth of human emotion, the lengths to which people would go to protect their deepest, most painful truths, even if it meant living with a lifetime of regret. The compartment, hidden within the intricate design of the music box, was no accident. It was a calculated choice, a deliberate act to preserve a love story that had long been forgotten by the world. Miss Marple's fingers trembled slightly as she held the delicate wedding ring, its intricate craftsmanship belying its understated elegance. In that moment, the ring became far more than a mere token of affection. It was the embodiment of a life that might have been, a life filled with love and hope, yet undone by the suffocating grip of societal norms. She gazed at it, her mind tracing the fragile line between what was and what could have been. "This ring," she whispered softly, "is a symbol of the future Lillian could have had, of a love so pure, yet crushed by the weight of pride and prejudice." The words were heavy, laden with the unspoken truth of a love that had never been allowed to blossom. The ring represented more than a union between two souls. It spoke of a world that could not accept their bond, a world that had made it impossible for love to flourish. Miss Marple's gaze softened, her heart aching for a woman whose dreams were swept away by the very hands that should have held her close. "It's a token of what could have been," she added quietly, the sorrow in her voice unmistakable. She could almost feel the weight of the years that had passed, the aching void left in the wake of a love denied. As the faint gleam of the ring caught the light, Miss Marple's mind wandered to the possibility of what Lillian's life could have been like had fate been kinder. Perhaps there would have been laughter, the joy of shared moments, the soft intimacy of a life built together. Instead, the ring now served as a silent elegy, a reminder of all that had been lost. The world had made its choice, a choice that condemned their love to exist only in secret, locked away in the quietest corners of their hearts. It was a powerful symbol of the sacrifices made, the hopes dashed, and the unfulfilled promises that echoed through the passage of time. For Miss Marple, the ring was a poignant reminder that even in the quietest hearts passions and aspirations linger. It was a testament to the enduring nature of human longing, to the dreams that refuse to fade, even when buried by the harsh reality of circumstance. The cost of these sacrifices, she mused, is never truly understood until time has passed, and what remains are the memories of what could have been. The ring now resting in her hand encapsulated that truth, holding within it the weight of a life that might have been lived differently. In a final act of reverence, Miss Marple wound the music box once more. The soft melancholy tune filled the room, each note like a whispered secret, a haunting refrain from a bygone era. The melody seemed to hold the very essence of the mystery she had unraveled, a story of love, loss and regret. As the final notes lingered in the air, Miss Marple allowed herself a moment of reflection. "Let this be the final chapter," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the music. The words were a benediction, an acknowledgement that the case had reached its conclusion. The music box, with all its secrets, was now at peace. She closed the lid gently, sealing the memories of a past that had remained hidden for far too long. The soft strains of the tune seemed to linger in the room, a final farewell to a love that had been lost to time. As the music faded away, Miss Marple was left in a quiet contemplation, a mix of satisfaction for the justice she had uncovered, and a lingering sense of melancholy. The mystery had been solved, but the echoes of its tragedy would remain, forever intertwined with the memories of those whose love had been lost to the relentless passage of time. And in that silence, Miss Marple understood the true cost of secrets, the ones that are kept, and the ones that are finally revealed. As the last faint note of the music box dissolved into the heavy silence, Miss Marple felt a melancholic weight settle within her, a recognition of the unchangeable nature of human frailty. The case was solved, the truth laid bare before her, yet there was a haunting realization that no matter how thoroughly the mysteries of the past were unraveled, some secrets, some wounds were destined to remain unhealed. Her eyes lingered on the delicate gold ring, its inscription a ghost of a past love that had never been allowed to flourish, its promise extinguished by forces beyond their control. This truth, while revealing, could never undo the damage done, nor could it heal the hearts left behind in its wake. Some mysteries, no matter how much we wish to uncover them, are bound to remain with us, she whispered softly to herself, a sense of profound understanding washing over her. It was a reminder that the heart, no matter how sharp the mind that seeks to understand it, will forever retain its mysteries. And as the final note from the music box drifted into the quiet, Miss Marple realized that while the story of Lillian and her lost love had been exposed, the emotional scars left by this tragedy would never completely fade. The truth had been freed, but it had come at a cost that could never be fully measured. The human heart, after all, is a fragile thing, capable of bearing both unbearable joy and unspeakable pain. The events of the past may have been shrouded in secrecy for so long, but now that the veil had been lifted, they stood as a testament to a love that was never meant to be, an eternal reminder of how choices made in silence can ripple through the fabric of time, changing the course of lives in ways we can never fully comprehend. In the stillness that followed, Miss Marple's thoughts turned inward. She reflected on the delicate balance between protecting those we love and confronting truths that may tear them apart. What if one were to uncover a secret so profound, so damning, that it could change the course of everything? Would one choose to guard it, preserving the fragile peace of those involved, or would they expose it, regardless of the consequences, in the name of justice? It was a question that gnawed at her, even as she closed the music box one final time, sealing away all the emotions and revelations it had brought forth. Would you choose silence, or would you choose truth? Miss Marple asked softly, a lingering question in the air that would never fully be answered. As the camera zoomed out from the closed music box, Miss Marple's voice echoed one last time, inviting the viewers to join her in pondering this moral dilemma. The choices we make, the secrets we keep, shape not only our lives but the world around us. And sometimes, in uncovering one truth, we must ask ourselves what we are willing to sacrifice in the process. Would you expose the secret, knowing that the very revelation could destroy the lives of those you care about? Or would you let the truth remain hidden, and carry the weight of that silence with you forever? With that, the camera cut to the soft glow of a fading sunset. The questions linger, and I invite you to share your thoughts. What would you do in the face of such a dilemma? Are some secrets best left buried, or does truth always demand to be revealed? Let us know in the comments below. Your insights will not only deepen this conversation, but will also serve as a mirror to our own choices in life. If you found this story compelling, be sure to subscribe for more mysteries that unravel the darkest corners of the human soul. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family, who appreciate stories that make them think, question and reflect. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, I look forward to uncovering more secrets with you on our next adventure.